Hello everybody, welcome back to Feldy, Farming Simulator 11, wonderful map by Farmer Yeah. We are sitting here kind of on our back roadway next to the hogs, listening to them grunt contentedly, even though I don't think we really have any in there. I'm kind of overlooking a field here, and I know we've noticed this, I've commented on it before in game. Next to where I'm parked here, to the left, is a field of red clover. And what you see is there are areas where there is no red clover appearing. And it follows exactly where the windrow is dropped. You know, there's a bunch of messy grass here because the swather picked up some of the grass along the edges and dumped it in the field, and of course the forage harvester didn't pick it up. But you can see all the strips out here as it's coming back in, and really I don't know that it makes a bit of difference at all ultimately, because the windrows come out a certain size. Even clipping just the little bit that's here and the swather puts it down, the forage harvester picks it up, we end up having plenty of material. But it's been bugging me for some time, and I recently decided to see if I could figure out a way to fix it. And you know, looking ahead, I'm kind of wondering how come I'm seeing this green. I do know that underneath the field, it's there is no nothing underlaying the field, so it sees just the grass texture. Maybe it's always been there and I've just never noticed, particularly when the field is full of red blooms. But I want to come down here. There is a field over here that I didn't cut that also has a red clover in it, and I just want to take a look at it here because you can see just how streaked it is. And at one point I mentioned, and I probably will still do this, maybe this forces me to take the field out. And here you can kind of see it in the distance textures rather easily. You see the strips up here, which is kind of how we cut the field last time. I don't know if I'm going to cut it that way again. But even up close, you can just tell something is missing. It's and as a perennial crop, you know, that is a crop that doesn't need to be replanted, you know, that just regrows. It seems strange that you wouldn't have anything under the windrows. Now, I mean, in real life, if you let windrows sit on the ground for a long period of time, of course, it's gonna kill the product that's underneath. You know, I think most of us understand that. But assuming you pick it up, just like with when you cut grass, the grass fully regrows, it fills in all the area, and there's no problems. So I've been trying to wrap my head around how to fix this particular issue. It appears it has something to do with a windrow being able to peacefully coexist in Farm Sim 11 in the same space as the foliage. And you gotta remember, in these versions of the game, I think starting Farm Sim 15, 13, 11, and back, when you set up a map, you also, and set up new crops or whatever, you also at the same time set up the windrow. And the more I see of this, the more I'm picking up that they can't occupy the same space. You know, it's either going to be foliage like you see, or it's going to be windrow. And so some additional coating is needed, and it's fully in place, you know, for grass in game, that when you pick up a windrow, it somehow replants the grass that's underneath. So of course it all grows back in. But whatever coating there is for the grass, it sure isn't there for red clover. So, like I say, I've been working on a fix, and I think I finally figured out what I need to do after, more hours than I would care to admit, because I enjoy tinkering. For the moment, I want to get out of the game and this will kind of be a little modding exercise. And I guess I'm sharing it because I don't know how many people still play these old games. Back in the day, it was incredibly hard for me to find answers to some of these things. And so maybe if there is some person out there working with an old FS11 map, maybe they have the same issue and maybe this will help them out. Anyway, I'll get out of game here, back in a moment. Alright, we are here in some Lua code. What I decided to look at was the coding for picking up these windrows. Now, this grass schwad Lua, or however you say that, is part of the Kloss pickup unit. I maybe could go there to show a picture of it. It's the header that is on the forage harvester that picks these up, you know, that are in the field. And what it has is it had a special swath Lua files so that you could use that type of header. I'm trying to remember if in-game the forage header in Farm Sim 11, or the forage harvester rather, in Farm Sim 11 had a header that would pick up windrows off the ground. I know it would take corn. I mean, you could take it out in the corn patch. I don't recall if it had a windrow pickup. And so what I think is being done here is someone modded a header for the forage harvester that would do just that. I know it would come in later versions of Farming Sim, but for this one here it required a special script. So someone is adding a specialization, you know, to embed this script. And the whole point of it is to pick up a windrow off the ground and to shoot it into the trailer, you know, following the forage harvester. So it's intended to work with it, and it's on the trailer. Well, when you open the thing up and you start looking at some of the code, you figure out that it's going to pick up certain things, and it specifically is related to feed stuff. And so in Feldy, and this is kind of designed specifically for Feldy, you know, I really don't know who authored it. For all I know, it was Dr. Hilty, you know, as he was helping Farmeria put all this together for Feldy. But it's picking up feed stuff, so that's going to constitute Red Clover. It's going to be the peas, and seems like there was one other one that would pick up. Maybe just the two. Anyways, these make the feed stuff. Well, when you pick up the peas, nobody cares if it kills the windrow or kills the crop underneath the windrow because peas aren't perennial. They don't regrow. But if you are picking up red clover, it is perennial. It is going to regrow. And so what this script does not do is it doesn't regrow the red clover underneath. So I wanted to try to force it to do it. And so what I did is I added some code here to this script that, and basically what it's doing is it's looking for a couple fruit types that are going to be acceptable to it. It's cycling through the whole, all of the fruit types, you know, that are in this table that it could pick up, and it's trying to determine what it is. And if there is something there, if it detects peas, if it detects red clover, it tells it, hey, turn it into feed stuff. That's, you know, what you want to blow into the trailer behind. Or that's kind of what the forage harvester is to do it. So it's a clever little script, which means, you know, it isn't going to pick up grass or those kinds of things. Or if the header was set up for grass, you know, what this is going to do is it'll just turn it into feed stuff, you know, which is kind of interesting, really. You could set this to pick up grass. I didn't experiment with that. But anyway, that's kind of what this whole area is trying to accomplish. There's a bunch of, you know, util functions, Lua functions that are doing that. Here's what I added. I basically came into here, if area is greater than 0, area just means there was material there to pick up. You know, if it was something it didn't recognize, then area would be equal to 0, so it's going to bypass this whole section of text, or of code rather. But if it has something to pick up, meaning if it found some feed stuff, then it's going to come in here and do some things. And so I figured I would just tag along and I would add a couple lines of code. And as it turns out, I needed just a couple lines. And brother, let me tell you, I can't begin to explain everything I tried in here, because I am not a professional coder, so a lot of times my way of attempting something when I don't know how to do it is to get close to what I figure is the ballpark and then just try some things. So, and for study, let me just pull this up. Yeah, I think this is utils. So a lot of these functions are used in the code, these utils, whether it's switch fruit type area. Okay, well, mask fruit ID. So let's say mask is barley and you want to replace it all with wheat. So you put wheat over here, the code for wheat with barley. You describe the parallelogram. That's what all these are for, to describe the 3 points on the map for the parallelogram, and you give it a value. You can swap between one type of fruit and another. So I tried this one here, but it never worked. And I think it's because when the windrow was taken out, there was no fruit on the ground, so it couldn't switch from one to another. I mean, I even tried using fruit type unknown, and it just didn't work. And this was one of many. This was another one at growth state. Maybe there would have been a way in here. I couldn't figure out how to use that util. A lot of this, just reading it in here, without a boatload of study, without having documentation for all these formulas and variables in here, you're kind of up a creek and you're left to experiment kind of on your own. So there were several in here, and I did some funny things. One of the things that went through my mind is, well, what if you have it cultivated, then you replant, and you replant red clover? Well, it worked perfectly. For a while I had it cultivating, behind wherever the forage harvester went. I had it plant something, and that put in the planted texture, on there, and it was just kind of interesting seeing where all that led. But ultimately I wasn't satisfied. So I said, well, can I figure out these engine functions that are in here, set density parallelogram? And there is, I've maybe shown a link before to the Giants Developer Network, where they have a forum and you can discuss certain things like this and and the Giants have some documentation, but it is really at, let's just say it isn't very user-friendly to novices. And frankly, I'm not even sure how helpful a lot of it is to a professional programmer. It'll tell you, for example, that it's an integer for the windrow ID, and it'll define the variables. But what does it mean? What is a windrow ID? Where do I find the windrow IDs? How do I know which windrow ID is a wheat windrow versus barley versus red clover? It isn't going to tell you any of that. Or value of what? What does that mean? And what is this 0 and 2? What do all these things mean? So you're left, or at least I feel, at least at the level I'm able to try to work with this, kind of left on my own to experiment, to tinker, to try some of these things in here and see kind of what works. Because when we go back over to here, you see all the X, Y, Z. What this code is doing up here is it is grabbing the 3 points that define a parallelogram. And what parallelogram is that? It's the working area, the cutting area on the header for the forage harvester. This is the specific area, the little square in-game on the map that it's going to pick up material. So that defines the parallelogram, and then within that, that's where these utils functions are doing things, by sending those points in. So I tried everything in the kitchen sink, to try to get this to work. And the thing I finally landed on was, I couldn't get any of the utils functions to work, so I tried my hand at this one here, an engine command, set density parallelogram. And the documentation on this is both voluminous and sparse. And sparse in terms of understanding, voluminous meaning it's everywhere. And I think at some point with some modders as they use it, maybe there's a light bulb moment where they finally figure out how to manipulate this thing. But I don't know. I've never claimed to be the sharpest tool in the shed. For me, it is really, really hard. But here's what I did. So it comes in here, and if it finds feed stuff, it does what it does. So I said, well, hey, if the feed stuff happens to come from red clover, so if the fruit type that's being talked about here is equal to red clover, then do a few things in here. So the first thing I did is I wanted to get the ID in the map of where the red clover is, because in the map is where you want to fix it. So after much study, found this GE current mission fruits. This will plug in the red clover to get the specific IDS, and then it has an ID. And this is from studying the code. I know this is what it needs to be. This here was after an error popped. I think to keep it just the tiny little square on the header, you got to use this util. When I didn't have this in here, when I drove the forage harvester, it did all this for half of the field that I was in, which will look really screwy. But this seemed to fix it. Someone smarter than me probably knows exactly what's going on, and we could look at the code in this. But the point is I was adjusting the 3 points to the parallelogram to then plug into this one here to set the density. So it says grab red clover in the map at this particular parallelogram location with the first channel, and there are 3 channels for growth state. Put in channel 1. And channel 1, of course, is the replant channel, where it doesn't really, you won't see anything. You won't see any evidence of it being there until it starts to grow. And oh, I can't emphasize this. I'm not asking anybody to feel bad for it, because I'm a tinkerer, but you have no idea how long it took to come up with just this. And I'm hoping to remember it so I can try to learn further on this in the future. Anyway, maybe I'll try to show something here. Just take a brief segue. I got a post up. I know I've mentioned FSUK a number of times in some of my videos. FSUK was a wonderful forum back in the day. I think it closed in 2019-ish, somewhere in there. Where it was just old school style. You could leave a post and people would answer your post, or it wouldn't get answered. There were mods, there were people there who were modders, people that are very knowledgeable, people there who are dumb as a post like I am, and trying to find information. And it was a gold mine. You could search the forum to find information on various things. One of the posters on there that I really admired, and maybe people have heard the name before, Decker MMIV, is a scripter. I almost think he's a professional computer programmer in his day job, which makes sense. But a number of his mods use the Lua code. He's had to manipulate the things in the game, figure lots of things out, and so he would often leave these beautiful posts just chock full of good information. And that's what really makes a forum like FSUK really, really valuable, and why I miss it so much since it was closed. Before it closed, what I did is I went in and I copied every single one of his posts. I think they had this feature, you could click on the person and you would have access to every post that person had made. I went in there, I saved the HTML, whatever pictures they had, whatever they had in there. And so here is one of the posts that he had, and it's kind of in a string of, several others. I don't know if that was his 1179th or 77th post. But anyway, he left one here. This is from November 7th of 11. And so you know it's on going to be on Farm Sim 11 or even 09. It's possible it's for 09, but the principles are similar. So you look at this here, for max 15 fruits, and I think that is how the standard map is set up for Giants, is for 15 fruits. They don't use all the slots, so a modder can add a few more fruits if they want. But what he's explaining here is how these Giants editor channel groups work. You know, and everybody has seen that in here. Like, I got Feldy map in here. What he's talking about is this particular area right here. When you go in to change foliage, terrain foliage paint mode, you see all these foliage channels down here. You can pick which layer you want, and there's various channels, and we fill in the boxes, and that's how we put things on the map. Well, underlying this file is an i3D file that has all the fruits defined. It says how many channels there are, so that there are even boxes in here to check. And if the i3D file isn't set up to have some of them, it's going to be grayed out like you see kind of here. So that's kind of, that's what he's explaining here, is the way the Giant's set up for 15. Hey, the first 4 boxes that you see are the fruit type. Well, going to our Lua code here, we've already specified this here is Red Clover. So we've already taken care of this first part. But you'll notice that there's growth states here, and there are 3 of them. So that is where we get over here. You know, this 0, I think, is the first channel for the first growth state, maybe. Yeah, and some of this I'm not 100% sure of. I'm going to do my best to explain at least as I understand it. But this one here is the number of channels. See, here's the definition I copied to add into here so I could study set to density parallelogram. And this is what I mean. This is their documentation. Integer, transform ID, float X. Well, that's the type of variable and everything. So it tells you all these things. Then you get down here, first channel. And this is something else. I think these channels work on the binary system, 0s and 1s. So just like a switch, it's either on or off. So 0 or 1. So what kind of confuses a matter is, you know, when we come in here and we see channel 1, in binary, I think that's actually a 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3. So you kind of got to keep that in mind as well, you know, as you look at this. But the first channel or the first box is 0. I think that's why that's a 0. There are 3 of them related to growth state for the foliage, just like Decker has in his post. And then he has a couple in here. These are nuances for cut short, cut long, and it tells you how many channels there are. And when you click on them, you know, this has a single option. Either one, it's on or it's off. It will appear or it won't. But when you have 2 or 4 or 3, you got more options. And anybody that's ever tinkered with this, you know, for some mapping purposes, you gotta know which box you're clicking as to whether it's gonna look planted freshly, kind of in the middle of its growth, or ready to harvest, or those kinds of things. And then there's even a couple for windrow, and this must be the older version. I know there's more as the game goes to kind of reflect varying depths of the windrow. And the more, this also then would dictate how much material was in the windrow, so the game knew how much to pick up and put in the wagon. But I think in these earlier versions, it just was either a windrow was there or it wasn't. Or at least that's kind of how it appeared to me. Maybe there was just, you know, with a couple. But all of these things, kind of as he's getting into here, this is just a brilliant post, you know, as he starts defining these things, these terms, you know, that we would see. Where would we see them? It'd be over here, like, here's the Feldy map, opened in a text file. Here's the foliage multi-layer, where it has all the crops, and down here, of course, is Red Clover. But, you know, each crop is given its own index. Wheat is always at the top, 1. grass is 2, and so forth and so on. And you got to be careful to monitor. Even hedge has a number, even though it isn't a harvestable crop. So red clover is density map type index 9, and it says, where do you start defining growth? It says density map channel offset 4. Well, so when you come in here, it isn't the number 4. Remember, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're the planted, except I need to get the right crop. I'm in OSR. Here's red clover. There we go. So the first channel here that's actually 4 is a 5. I know that doesn't make any sense. But 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's 3 channels in here. Clicking boxes 5, 6, or 7 will define every single one of the growth states, you know, the red clover's going to have. And generally there's, what is there, 4 of them? You know, you have planted, it's growing a little bit, kind of mid-growth, and then you have harvestable stage, or maybe it's 5, I don't know what it is. That's defined for each one. But this tells you where to start looking at growth states for red clover. And then this tells you, well, here's how many growth or channels that there are. 3 of them. You know, and like I say, that's these 3 channels here. So it's just a brilliant post, you know, by Decker, going through all of these items in here as he understands them. And there are some, you know, that nobody quite understands how they're used, how they're called up in the game. But those that he could explain, he put into this awesome post. And these were just gold whenever you would search FSUK. And he's doing the favor of showing all the channels. And so we're over here in our little Lua code trying to impact this through code instead of having to come to the editor to do it. And again, the whole purpose of this is, can you please replant red clover when I pick up the windrow? And so, assuming you've picked up a red clover, it says come in here, set the density parallelogram. This is defined as red clover. Here's our box we're putting it in. First channel, 3 channels total with a value of 1. So this is kind of given the spread, and then it's a value of 1. Now, you kind of need to know a little bit about binary code, I suppose. You know, why would it be a value of 1? Well, a value of 1, like if you look at this in terms of switches, you know, there's 3 of those growth channels, so it'd be like a value of 7 would be all 3 of them clicked. You know, that would look something like this. You know, and if you, I guess I don't have it on, but it would look something like this. That would be a value of 7. You know, we have a value of 1, so that's going to be 1 box clicked, and you're not seeing anything here. But I have a feeling if we went in and played the game, if we saved this, we would eventually see red clover growing, because channel 0, the first one, has a value of 1. And if I'm explaining this wrong, hopefully someone will chime up in the comments and tell me or fix it for everybody as to how this works. But that's what's going on here. This value of 1 is replanting red clover, so it'll grow. If we wanted to put it at a harvestable state, let me see, is it value of 7? No, that isn't it. Let me just see real quick. Is 6 and 7? No, that doesn't look right. I wonder if it's 5 and 7. There we go. This is what we want to see for harvestable red clover. Alright, so it's this one and this one. So if we go back to our binary chart, it'll be a value of 5, I believe. 101. Switches being on this would be the 5 box and the 7 box. So in other words, if we wanted to have full harvestable, we would put a value of 5 here. At least that's what my understanding is of this, and like I say, if someone else knows better than what I'm trying to describe here, I guess I didn't try it. It might be a fun thing to tinker with further, to try to put a 5 in here and see what it does. I just haven't. All I know is this actually works after trying it in game, and so I'm gonna try to do that here in a moment. Um, First, let me bail out of here, and I won't save anything because we don't need it in game. So I think that's everything I want to cover here. Be back in just a moment as soon as I start up the game again. Alright, we are back in game here, and actually this isn't my regular save. This is kind of a test map or whatever that I've been using to tinker with all this. You'll notice it doesn't have the field under here. This has never been replanted, and it's pristine. You know, I was kind of tinkering with something in here, and you'll see there's a bell. It has a full-on field of it, so this should work well for our test here. So what I want to do is pick up some of the swath, and so we'll just travel a little bit here. We'll pick up some material. We don't even care if we capture it in the wagon. We're just trying to pick it up off the ground, because what our script is supposed to be doing at the same time, even though we can't see it, as we look at the ground, it is replanting Red Clover, or at least that's kind of what the hope is. Everywhere that the header goes, it is doing that, including the areas under the windrow that we're picking up. So what we'll do here in a moment, as soon as I pick up enough of this, is we're going to fast forward time, and we're going to see kind of what this looks like as it fills back in, as the red clover regrows. Because it also needs to regrow to the sides of the windrow, as well as on the windrow itself. So that's probably sufficient area. So right now we've cut it. We wouldn't have a clue if there's anything in here. It looks like it's totally gone. And so I'm going to fast forward time here. Let me just get the ad going. And meanwhile, I'm going to fly up so we can see it happen live. Just toggle. All right, there we go. Let's take a little flight. Now I'm encouraged to see, it's going to get dark on us. As we look where the windrow is, you can kind of see where it's taken out. You see there is nothing underneath that windrow because it's etched into the field. But oh yeah, it's too late now. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Don't see any stars. Alright, we'll be daylight here in just a moment. There we go. I don't know how long it's going to take to regrow, but what I see over here where the windrow's been picked up is look how that's filling in solid. I know it's kind of hard. You got to kind of look at an angle. Maybe I should go up even higher. But you see there's no windrow in the middle of the greenish blue as it regrows, unlike you see over here. I mean, that is very clearly laid down there. It's obvious it can't share space with the foliage. And over here where it's picked up, I appreciate how it's growing in. The problem we had is kind of like I was showing you before, all those terrible streaks, and I'm not seeing the streaks. And now it's going to take another night probably to fully regrow because of what I plugged into the map for how long it should take for the growth states. So we'll give it another night. Interestingly, this version of it, maybe it does add in the more recent versions too, it speeds through the night, which is kind of cool. So we're just on fast forward. Aha, here, all right, we're filling in, and as it gets daylight here, it's gonna, there it's dead on the windrow. Here it is not. So I call this a win, because I don't see the windrow. Well, you can see a little bit of it clear up in the corner at the top of the screen, but I didn't pick that windrow up. So just adding that tiny little bit of code, I'm really pleased that it, let me just slow time down. Can I slow time down? Alt, oh, I was doing the wrong way. But that's what it took. It took me forever and a day to find it, but I think I finally have a fix where it will now replant my red clover underneath. Now here's the thing. That will work for this handy machine over here called a forage harvester. But you remember, I can also bale this stuff. So I have a feeling if I pulled the baler in here, it would not replant underneath the windrow unless and until I modify the baler Lua files. And the baler one, see, this other one that we had was a custom script, so it's pretty easy for me to go in there and just kind of put something in over the top of what the mod author did. But when it's the giant script, which the baler is, then I'm going to have to do some other things to it in order to make it work. But I don't know that I'll ever again bale the Red Clover, so maybe it's something I just don't need to worry about. But for the moment, I do know it works for the forage harvester, and that makes me pretty happy. Just wanted to share it with everybody. Sorry this one's a little bit long. I know you heard the bell go, and I didn't really do much farming, but I hope you all are doing great. Thanks for coming along to watch this, and you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye till the next time.